Arcela. Juan graduated, as he shared with us, from USF this past May. He has been a part of Nielsen Toastmasters since January of 2015 and has recently completed his Competent Communicator Manual. He will be moving to Sarasota in August to begin his professional career with USF Sarasota campus, where he will be giving presentations regularly as an admissions recruiter. His Toastmasters goals include starting a youth leadership program and competing in the World Championship of Public Speaking.
Right.
Today, he will be giving a speech from Project 10 of the Competent Communicator Manual, titled, Moments That Shape Us. I present to you Juan Arcela, Moments That Shape Us.
I was 8 years old when I experienced the most significant moment in my life. It was the day my world was flipped upside down. And no, I'm not talking about the day when I found out that Santa Claus isn't real or how babies are really made. Those mind-blowing epiphanies didn't come until much later in my life. The year is 2002. My dad and I had just arrived to Miami International Airport after a grueling 7-hour flight from Bogota, Colombia. We were about to begin a new chapter in our lives. On the drive out of the airport, I turned to my dad and I asked him the one question that was avoiding the entire flight. I said, "Daddy, when are we going back home to Colombia?" And he looked at me straight in the eyes, very sincerely, and said, "Son, I don't know when we're going back. This country is our new home now." And that hit me like a bucket of ice cold water. Because at that moment I realized we weren't on vacation. And as I looked outside the window of that cab, I could see the faces of my friends and family fade away. I didn't know it was going to be 12 years until I was able to go back and see them again. I realized I was in a country whose native language I didn't speak. And I felt like I lost my identity. That was the day my world was flipped upside down. But it's also the most significant moment in my life, because the lessons that I learned in that first year living in America has shaped me into the person that I am standing in front of all of you today. Ms. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and esteemed guests, can you think back to a significant moment in your life when you felt like your world was flipped upside down? We all have trials and tribulations in our lives, but I'm sure every single one of us here can look back and say, we're more mature, we're wiser, and we are stronger because of what happened. These are the moments that shape us. And there are lessons to be learned from everything we experience, whether we feel it's good, and especially when we feel it's bad. I remember the first lesson that I learned from living in this country was about optimism, and I learned that from my father. One very rainy afternoon, I go inside the apartment, and I find my parents bickering with each other. My mom was mad at my dad because he couldn't find a job, and the bills were starting to pile up. Well, the argument escalated until they were both screaming at each other from the top of their lungs. And then something very unexpected happened. My dad broke down in the middle of the argument, completely. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever seen your dad cry before, but that is a very powerful moment, especially for a little kid. Because to me, my dad was a superhero. He was infallible. And yet at that moment, I was seeing him at his most vulnerable. And that really shook me up. And because he started to cry, I started to cry. Because I started to cry, my mom started to cry. And because she started to cry, my little sister started to cry. So there we were in the middle of our tiny one-bedroom apartment, huddled together, wallowing in our tears, and feeling completely hopeless. Then all of a sudden we heard a loud noise, like a loud croaking sound. And at first we got startled because maybe we thought an animal had sneaked into the apartment. But we heard it again, and when we looked down, we realized that sound was coming from my little sister. In the middle of crying, she got the hiccups. But it didn't sound like the meek hiccups from a tiny 2-year toddler. It sounded like she had just swallowed Kermit the Frog, because she sounded obnoxiously loud. And she realized this, and she broke out in laughter. And because she started laughing, I started laughing. Because I started laughing, my mom started laughing. And because she started laughing, my dad started laughing. It was at that moment that my dad said, look, the reality is we're struggling right now. We're going through difficult times. But at least we have each other. We have our health, and we have our love for one another. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters, because we are going to get through this together. The lesson of optimism was clear. We may not always be in control of the external things that happen to us in our lives, but we're always most definitely in control of how we react and interpret those moments. And we can always choose to remain optimistic. And that is a lesson that I carry with me to this very day. The second lesson that I learned was from my mother. And she taught me about the importance of humility. You see, my mom came from a very poor family in Colombia. And ever since she was a little girl, my grandma told her, if you want to get out of poverty, if you want to succeed, you have to educate yourself. So from a very young age, she became a very brilliant and dedicated student. She financed her private school education through scholarships alone. And when she got to college, she worked full-time during the day and studied full-time at night. She did that for about 6 years. And when she graduated at the age of 25, she landed a job as the executive manager of a city bank, which is a pretty big deal because she was the youngest person that ever did that. She worked really hard to get to where she was, as I'm sure you all have. Think for a moment, how hard do you have to work for to get to where you are in your professional and career lives right now? Can you imagine having that completely stripped away from you, literally overnight, and having to wash dishes, work at a factory, or wait tables? That was a very deeply and humbling experience for my mom. But she never felt ashamed, and she never felt like she was above anything. And I remember one night, she took me to an office she was cleaning, and she wanted me to help. Of course, I use that word loosely because I was doing a very poor job. I didn't put much effort into it. And she took me aside, sat me down and said, Juan, it doesn't matter if you're cleaning an office or you're the CEO of this company. Everything you touch must turn into gold. You either do things right or don't do them at all. And that is the kind of work ethic she took to everything she did. She became the best waitress at her restaurant. She was the fastest packager at her factory. And she made sure every crook and cranny of the office was clean, squeaky clean every night she left. And she applies that work ethic even today as the loving and caring preschool teacher that she is right now. That lesson of humility is the most profound lesson I've learned from my mother. She taught me to give 100% of my efforts and talents to everything, whether it's a big project or a small one. Now, the final lesson that I learned was the most difficult one for me. And it was about patience. When my family first came to this country, we didn't speak any English. And I remember it was especially difficult for me to learn English because I hated it. I didn't like the pronunciation of the words. I didn't like how everything was gender neutral. And the grammar, I still have grammar about it. But thinking back, the reason I didn't like English right away was because it didn't come easy to me. Right? It wasn't served on a silver platter, so I became impatient. And I remember one night, my parents took me aside and said, Juan, there are two kinds of people in this world. There are patiently impatient people, otherwise known as PIs. These are people that are patient with their goals. They wait till New Year's to start their resolutions. They wait till the stars are perfectly aligned to start their projects. And when they do get around to starting, they give up right away when things get tough. You don't want to be like this people. You want to be like the second group of people, impatiently patient people, IPs. These are people that are impatient in the sense that they take massive action on initiative. And they're patient in the sense that they stick with things, even when it gets tough. You want to be impatiently patient. And after that night, I committed myself to the English language completely. I started to read more books in English, I watched TV in English, and I started interacting with other English-speaking students. And after about 6 months, I was actually translating for the other Spanish-speaking students that came around the same time as I did. Now, funny enough, that lesson of patience was something that I had to remember 1 year ago when I first joined Toastmasters. I was terrified of public speaking. I just wanted to get those butterflies out of the way. And even after the first, second, and third project, I still felt those butterflies. And there were many times when I wanted to quit and never come back. But I remember that lesson that my parents taught me, to be impatiently patient and to commit and stick with things. And now I have the privilege to close my final speech with you guys here today. Fellow Toastmasters, we all have moments when we feel things are hopeless and bleak. And it's during those moments that I learn from the abnormal sounds of a 2-year toddler and the lessons of my dad that we can always choose to remain optimistic. We all have moments where we may feel like we're above things and we feel ashamed. And it's during those moments that I learned from my mother to remain humble and to give 100% to everything we do. And we all have moments when we feel frustrated, like we can't do something. And it's during those moments that I learned to be impatiently patient, to take massive action, but to stick with things even when it gets tough. I was 8 years old when I experienced the most significant moment in my life. I thought my world was flipped upside down. But these are the moments that shape me. What are yours?